Tired of starting projects with enthusiasm only to lose steam halfway through? Ever wonder why motivation can burst in like a party crasher, loud, exciting, and full of energy, only to sneak out the back door the moment things get real? You're not alone. The science behind motivation reveals something quietly startling. The biggest reason you lose focus isn't laziness, but biology. Your brain is built for bursts, not marathons. Struggling to stay motivated and reach your full potential? This script reveals the scientific principles behind motivation and offers practical solutions to boost your focus and achieve your goals. Whether you're trying to finish that novel, train for a race, or simply stop doom scrolling and do your laundry, there's real psychology behind why you start strong and sputter out. You just probably won't know this. Your brain might actually be rewarding you for procrastination. Picture this: you're lying in bed, the soft hum of the night settling around you, and in your mind, you see yourself crushing your goals. It's perfect. You're focused, driven, practically glowing with success. But in reality, your to-do list is laughing at you from across the room. Sound familiar? Before you settle in, feel free to like the video if it brought you a little peace, and if you'd like to join us again, we'd love to have you back. Subscribe when you're ready. No pressure, just rest. Share something if you feel like it. Let's slowly drift into tonight's quiet moments together. And now, you ease into the science of why your motivation always seems to vanish when you need it most. Here's the unglamorous truth. Your brain is powered by a neurotransmitter called dopamine, the chemical behind anticipation, pleasure, and drive. When you set a goal, dopamine surges. It's not actually rewarding the completion of the goal, nope. It's rewarding the idea of progress. That hit of dopamine feels good. But once the novelty wears off, the dopamine drops. You're no longer high on motivation. You're now trudging through the boring middle. This cycle isn't broken, it's exactly how your system is built. In fact, a major study published in Neuron showed that dopamine levels peak not when you achieve a reward, but when you anticipate it. It's like your brain is more in love with the idea of the gym than the sweaty reality of being there. One of those odd facts: lab rats will press a lever thousands of times to pursue a reward, but once they get it, their activity plummets. That's right, tiny rat burnout. Sound familiar? You see this everywhere. Think about New Year's resolutions. January 1st is the dopamine festival. But by February, it's all soggy salads and expensive gym memberships mocking you from your bank statement. Scholars continue to debate whether motivation is a stable trait or a dynamic state. Some psychologists argue that people can be naturally more motivated, while others believe it's entirely contextual: your environment, your hormones, your last meal. Honestly? Probably a chaotic mix of both. Motivation fades quickly because it was never built to be steady. Evolution favored action in short bursts: hunt now, rest later. Your ancestors didn't stick to 30-day sprints, they chased a deer, then slept under a tree for hours. So if your motivation feels inconsistent, congratulations, you're biologically normal. But that doesn't mean you're powerless. You can actually hack this system by shifting how you define progress. Instead of chasing big, delayed goals, you start looking for micro rewards. Something immediate. Something tangible. Like crossing a tiny task off your list or doing 10 jumping jacks just to prove you're still alive. Something you'll want to know: a phenomenon called precrastination flips the usual script. It's the urge to start things too early, just to relieve the anxiety of having them on your plate. Researchers have found that people will actually carry heavy buckets across a room, ignoring closer options, just to get the task going sooner. Your brain would rather start wrong than wait right. And if you've ever rearranged your desktop icons instead of writing that proposal, you felt this. A weird relief from doing anything that looks productive, even if it's totally unrelated. The key is recognizing that initial surge for what it is: a spark, not a power source. You can't expect it to carry you the whole way, any more than you expect one sip of coffee to get you through a 12-hour shift. So your job isn't to chase motivation, it's to build systems that work when motivation slips. Here's a twist you didn't expect: some of the world's most prolific creators report having low daily motivation. The trick? They don't wait for it. They build rituals, routines, and tiny traps for themselves, things that drag them gently back to work when the dopamine runs dry. So when you wonder why that exciting project now feels like a chore, remember, it's not you. It's your chemistry. Here's a gentle shift now. You've learned that your brain's reward system can trick you into expecting consistency where there is none. But what happens when that trick becomes a trap? When you keep starting goals just to feel the rush, never intending to finish? That leads us into the next layer, where your brain begins to prefer starting over succeeding. And oddly enough, you'll kind of love it. That early burst of excitement, remember it? The notebook with the clean first page, the workout shoes still shiny from disuse, the planning app you downloaded but never opened again. It's addictively delicious, that feeling. Your brain adores it. And it's not just you, it's nearly everyone. That initial thrill of goal setting gives your brain a jolt of dopamine so potent, it almost doesn't matter what the goal is. It's the starting line that gives you the rush, not the finish line. This isn't just a poetic metaphor. Neuroscience actually backs it up. When you set a goal, the brain fires up what's called the mesolimbic pathway. That's the system responsible for pleasure, motivation, and reward processing. It's like your brain throwing a party just because you thought about improving your life. Pretty generous, right? But here's where things get sneaky. That dopamine spike is a reward in itself, and your brain starts to crave that feeling, not the work that follows. So what do? You set more goals. You map out more projects. You tell 5 friends about your new creative venture. But you don't move forward. Because somewhere deep inside, your brain has gotten comfortable with the illusion of progress. There's a phenomenon known as the intention-behavior gap. It's the space between what you plan to do and what you actually do. Studies show that the mere act of declaring your goal can trick your brain into believing you've already accomplished part of it. That sense of completion? It's a neurochemical mirage. This explains why writing a to-do list feels productive, even if you never complete anything on it. Your mind checks the achievement box just for organizing your life. Which is useful, until it becomes a loop. Write, plan, dream, repeat. But never quite do. An odd but true fact, people who post their goals on social media are actually less likely to achieve them. The external validation from likes and comments satisfies the same reward center that's supposed to be fueled by actual achievement. Your brain says, "Well done, you," and then promptly forgets to follow through. The issue has sparked significant intellectual debate. Some scholars argue that goal visualization improves performance by priming your brain. Others insist it undermines motivation by making you feel prematurely accomplished. The science isn't unanimous, but the pattern is clear. Starting can become addictive, especially if finishing feels far away. So how do you break this cycle? One trick is to use implementation intentions. Instead of vague goals like, "I want to write more," you tie your goal to a time and place. "I will write 200 words at my desk at 9 a.m. Sounds almost insultingly simple, but research from Peter Gallwitzer shows it can double or even triple your chances of following through. You're training your brain to link action with structure, not just abstract desire. The dopamine now gets attached to the doing, not just the dreaming. And here's a small tweak with big returns: start tracking your effort, not just your results. Instead of obsessing over weight loss, track how often you cook at home. Instead of focusing on publishing a book, track your daily word count. Why? Because effort gives you daily wins. Results? They often come too slowly to keep dopamine interested. You might find this surprising, but video game developers have already cracked this code. Games don't reward you only when you beat the final boss. They sprinkle achievements, progress bars, and visual feedback everywhere. Level 2 for showing up. Gold coins for pressing a button. It's all micro-validation, and it keeps players hooked. What if your to-do list worked the same way? What if brushing your teeth or answering 2 emails gave you a visible, satisfying tick mark? Spoiler, habit tracker apps like Habitica do this. Yes, they literally turn your goals into an RPG. Of course, gamifying your life won't solve everything. But it does shift your focus away from massive, intimidating goals and toward bite-sized victories. And that's what keeps the dopamine drip going, instead of blowing it all at the starting line. There's also the question of emotional momentum. When you start something new, you're often escaping something: boredom, guilt, pressure. The new goal feels like a lifeline. But if you don't build emotional resilience for the middle part, the tedious, unglamorous days, then the drop feels unbearable. You abandon ship, looking for a fresh dopamine high elsewhere. So, what's the counter strategy? You stop asking yourself, am I excited to do this? Instead, you ask, what's the next concrete step I can take, even if I feel nothing? The difference is subtle, but profound. A delightful oddity: researchers found that Olympic swimmers visualize not just standing on the podium, but also the cold water, the early alarms, the brutal turns. They practice mentally experiencing the boring parts. That's how they keep going when excitement fades. You can do the same. Think less about the finish line. Think more about the shoes you'll wear, the time you'll block out, the chair you'll sit in. Focus on getting into position, not achieving a result. And if you ever feel guilty for abandoning old goals, don't. You were likely addicted to the starting buzz, not the project itself. There's grace in knowing the difference. You're not flaky, you're chemically wired for novelty. But that wiring can be guided. As your mind drifts deeper, another layer opens. You've seen how dopamine hijacks your drive and turns goals into short-lived rushes. But beneath that, there's a deeper force: discipline. Not the rigid, no-fun kind. But something steadier, quieter, more durable. It's time to explore how discipline and motivation dance, and why some psychologists say one of them's a complete fraud. So, motivation gives you that exciting push, the chemical confetti cannon that explodes the moment you declare a goal. But then it fizzles, leaving you with a half-finished idea and a brain already hungry for its next dopamine snack. And that's where you start hearing another word creep into the conversation. A word that sounds much less fun. Discipline. Cue the collective sigh. Discipline doesn't come with fireworks. No dopamine high. No shiny planners or fresh gym memberships. But here's where it gets interesting. Some psychologists argue that motivation is actually overrated. A flashy tool, sure, but unreliable. Discipline, on the other hand, is the plain, sensible pair of shoes that never lets you down. And yet, people resist it like a bedtime alarm. This debate, motivation versus discipline, goes way back. Ancient philosophers like Aristotle insisted that true character is revealed in what you choose to do consistently, not what you feel inspired to do once in a while. Meanwhile, modern self-help culture leans hard on motivation as the star player. The problem? Motivation doesn't show up every day. But discipline just might, if you treat it right. Check this out. In a widely cited study by psychologist Angela Duckworth, students with high levels of self-discipline outperformed those with high IQs. Not just academically, but in things like homework completion, attendance, and study habits. Basically, grit beat smarts. Grit kept showing up when motivation called in sick. But that doesn't mean discipline is easy to come by. It's not some iron-willed superpower. In fact, here's a surprising twist: discipline gets easier when you remove decisions. That's the core idea behind choice architecture, the design of environments that nudge you into habits without needing a motivational speech every morning. Did you know this? Barack Obama, Mark Zuckerberg, and Steve Jobs all minimize trivial daily choices by wearing nearly identical outfits each day. The goal? Save cognitive energy for bigger decisions. This isn't about fashion. It's about preserving what psychologists call executive function, your brain's control center for making good choices. There remains considerable disagreement about whether willpower is a fixed resource or a renewable one. Some theories argue that willpower depletes like a battery, use it up, and you're toast by 4 p.m. Others believe it's more like a muscle that strengthens with use. The truth? Maybe both. But here's what's clear: relying solely on motivation is a recipe for inconsistency. Discipline, in contrast, is a structure you build to catch you when motivation bails. And you don't build it all at once. Discipline works like a soft staircase, not a cliff. One tiny step. One new routine. You don't start with a perfect gym schedule. You start by putting on your shoes every morning, even if that's all you do for a week. Because showing up is the win. And showing up repeatedly? That's how identity starts to shift. Monks in certain Zen traditions rise at 3:30 a.m. every day, not out of masochism, but to decouple action from preference. "I don't want to get up" becomes irrelevant. The bell rings, they rise. Over time, this detachment from mood actually builds peace. Weird, right? Discipline reduces suffering by eliminating the choice to suffer. So what if you treated your goals like that, not as things you pursue when you feel like it, but as things you do because they are what you do? Identity-driven discipline. You become the type of person who writes daily, not someone who writes when they're inspired. You become the type of person who exercises, not someone who waits to feel ready. The action becomes identity. And identity? That's a much more stable fuel source than emotion. And don't worry, this isn't about becoming robotic. It's about building systems that carry you through the uninspired days. And yes, there will be so many uninspired days. That's not failure. That's reality. Here's a trick: pre-commit to your own future. Make small contracts with yourself. Lay out your gym clothes the night before. Set a recurring calendar event labeled, "Be the version of me I like." Create friction around quitting. The fewer decisions you leave up to mood, the more you lean on discipline instead of motivation. This is where habit stacks come in. Pair a new habit with something automatic. For example, every time you make coffee, you stretch for 60 seconds. Every time you brush your teeth, you jot one gratitude sentence. Tiny links that grow into chains. Over time, these acts stop feeling like effort and start feeling like you. There's even a phrase in behavioral science for this: activation energy. The harder it is to begin something, the less likely you are to do it. Discipline lowers that barrier. It replaces "should I" with "this is next." So, when you hear someone say, "I'm just not motivated," translate it as, "I haven't made it easy enough to start." And when you find yourself thinking the same thing, ask, "What's one small thing I can do, even without motivation, that my future self will thank me for?" Because the truth is, you don't need to be inspired every day. You just need to be reliable. And reliability? That's discipline's sweet spot. Now, as we step gently into the next layer, notice how your self-image plays into this. If motivation is the spark and discipline is the structure, what's the engine beneath both? It's identity. Who you believe yourself to be, quietly, even unconsciously, shapes every choice you make. Let's see how even the smallest shift in identity can reshape your entire path. If discipline is your daily anchor, then identity is the silent current underneath everything, pulling you either toward your goals or away from them. You don't even notice it most of the time. It doesn't wave its arms or shout in motivational slogans. It just quietly answers one persistent question: who am I? And the way you answer that question, whether intentionally or not, shapes how much focus and motivation you can access. You might think you need better habits, more apps, or another productivity hack. But here's a quiet truth: most of the time, what you really need is to believe something new about yourself. Picture this. You want to start running. You wake up and say, "I should go for a run." But that sentence already tells your brain something. You're someone who isn't yet a runner. You're someone pushing against the grain. Now flip it. I'm a runner, so I run. See the shift. One phrase feels like dragging a boulder. The other feels like following gravity. Psychologists call this identity-based motivation. It's the idea that your behavior isn't just influenced by goals, but by how much that behavior aligns with your self-image. You don't brush your teeth because it's on your habit tracker. You do it because you see yourself as someone who takes care of their hygiene. It's effortless because it's embedded. A study from Stanford found that participants were more likely to vote when told, "Be a voter," instead of "vote." The first one tapped into identity. The second tapped into action. That subtle switch led to significantly higher turnout. Turns out, people act in ways that match who they think they are. So the real motivation boost comes not from external pressures or rewards, but from building your actions around the kind of person you want to become. Not just, do more writing, but, be a writer. Not just, eat healthier, but, be someone who respects their body. You're not faking it, you're shifting the narrative. And here's a curious little tidbit. Research shows that people are more likely to recycle when they see themselves as environmentally conscious citizens, rather than simply following rules. Give the action meaning through identity, and suddenly it sticks. Philosophers have long debated the nature of self-concept. Is identity fixed or fluid? Some schools of thought suggest we're bound by our past experiences and labels. Others argue that identity is constantly constructed, moment by moment, through action. The truth is probably messier. Your identity is a mixture of memory, belief, behavior, and feedback. But one thing's clear, it's not static. You can evolve it. And that evolution can fuel your motivation far more than external pressure ever could. Not what you'd guess, but true. People trying to quit smoking were twice as likely to succeed when they said, "I'm not a smoker," rather than, "I'm trying to quit." One phrase still identifies with the behavior. The other rejects it outright. Language matters. Identity matters more. So how do you shift your self-concept gently, without it feeling forced or fake? You start by asking, what kind of person would naturally achieve this goal? Then you behave like them, in small, boring ways, until it becomes true. Want to be more focused? Think, what would a focused person do right now? And then, do that. Over and over. And yes, there will be moments of friction. Times when the old identity wants to wrestle the new one to the ground. That's normal. That's not failure. It's just an echo of old wiring. The more you act in line with the new story, the quieter the old one becomes. In Japan, there's a concept called kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold. Instead of hiding the cracks, it highlights them, making the repaired piece even more beautiful. This, too, can be your identity. Not perfect, not unbroken, but pieced together with intention. A self-image that embraces the journey instead of faking perfection. And when setbacks happen, and they will, don't treat them as evidence that you're not the person you want to be. Treat them as normal turbulence. Even pilots get jostled on a smooth flight. One bad day doesn't erase your identity. It tests it. And each return, each recommitment, actually strengthens the new self. You don't need to make grand declarations. In fact, it's better if you don't. Quietly decide. Quietly act. Let the identity form through behavior. When you act like the kind of person who completes tasks, makes time for deep work, and stays kind to themselves through the mess, you become that person. And here's the best part. Once identity is aligned, motivation becomes more stable. It's no longer about getting pumped to do something, it's about congruence. You feel off when you don't act like yourself. And that's a powerful shift. Now, with your identity gently reshaping, we move into another invisible force that's often draining your focus without you realizing. It's not about who you are anymore, it's about how many decisions you're juggling. As your mental load grows heavier, motivation begins to slip through the cracks. Let's explore the toll that decision fatigue takes, and why eliminating 100 tiny choices can do more than one giant push of effort ever could. You ever notice how choosing dinner feels like solving a puzzle after a long day? Like your brain, once sharp in the morning, is now a soggy sponge trying to make basic choices? That's not a personality flaw, it's cognitive load. And it quietly wrecks your motivation more than you think. Cognitive load is the mental effort required to process information, make decisions, and manage multiple tasks. The heavier it is, the harder it becomes to stay focused, much less motivated. You're not lazy. You're overloaded. Here's the thing, your brain has a limited daily capacity for decisions. Some researchers estimate around 35,000 choices a day. From picking what socks to wear to deciding whether to answer that awkward email, your mental energy gets chipped away piece by piece. By the time you reach your actual goal, work, writing, exercising, budgeting, your brain is quietly waving a white flag. Here's a fresh insight. In a famous study from Columbia University, researchers offered people either 6 or 24 jam options at a market stand. Those offered fewer choices were not only more likely to sample, but significantly more likely to buy. Too many options didn't inspire freedom, it inspired paralysis. This is decision fatigue. It sneaks up on you. It's why your morning brain is like a laser, and your 4 p.m. brain is a drunk toddler with a remote. Motivation gets harder not because the task changed, but because your decision bandwidth ran out. Steve Jobs knew this. So did Barack Obama. They both minimized daily choices, same outfit every day, simplified schedules, so their cognitive energy stayed fresh for important stuff. This wasn't aesthetic minimalism. It was mental conservation. A fact you didn't ask for, some chess players burn over 6,000 calories a day during tournaments. Not because they're physically active, but because the cognitive load of constant decision-making sends their metabolism into overdrive. Yes, thinking too much can literally exhaust your body. There remains considerable disagreement about whether decision fatigue is a physical depletion, like draining glucose in the brain, or a perceptual one, feeling tired because you believe you're tired. Some psychologists argue the whole idea is overblown, while others say it's the cornerstone of burnout culture. Either way, we know this, reducing cognitive clutter boosts motivation. So what can you do about it? Start by offloading decisions, automate what you can. Choose your breakfast the night before. Schedule recurring meetings. Plan workouts ahead of time. Create a default for low-stakes stuff like lunch or your playlist. Every small thing you don't have to think about frees up energy for deeper work. Next, limit your options. Yes, really. Fewer tabs. Fewer apps. Fewer alternatives to scroll through. Choice feels luxurious, but too much choice becomes a motivational sinkhole. Create fixed workflows. Don't reinvent how you write your reports or set your budget each time. Consistency isn't boring, it's brain-saving. Not what you'd guess, but true, the most productive people often follow rigid routines, not because they're boring, but because they've learned that the freedom to focus comes from constraint, not chaos. Another tip, batch your decisions. Instead of deciding every morning whether to go for a walk, decide once on Sunday that you'll walk Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. This shrinks the daily inner debate. And that matters, because each, should I, drains just a little more juice from your motivational battery. And let's not forget digital clutter. Ever scroll through Netflix for 20 minutes and end up watching nothing? Your brain didn't lose interest. It just gave up. That's decision fatigue too. Curate your digital spaces like you curate your wardrobe. Less to sort through means more energy for action. Here's something practical. Keep a do later list. Not every idea needs to be solved right now. When your brain starts spiraling, should I learn French? Start a garden? Try yoga? Write it down and table it. Don't let every idea demand immediate cognitive rent. You're allowed to defer. Also, protect your prime hours. Most people have a peak mental window, usually mid-morning, when focus and willpower are at their strongest. Don't waste that block answering emails or reformatting spreadsheets. Do your deep work then. The harder the task, the earlier in the day it should go. That's not discipline, it's energy intelligence. And when you feel sluggish in the afternoon, it's not failure. It's biology. Your brain needs space to breathe. That's why some of the most successful creatives take long midday breaks, walks, or naps. Not because they're indulgent, but because they understand that sustained output requires recovery. And just a quirky note, Salvador Dali used to nap in a chair holding a spoon over a metal plate. The moment he drifted into sleep, the spoon would drop and wake him, leaving him refreshed and creatively recharged. His version of avoiding full shutdown, but still catching the edge of rest. So if your motivation fades as the day wears on, consider this. Maybe it's not a sign you're weak or lazy. Maybe it's a sign you've made too many micro-decisions, and your brain's buffer is full. Fewer choices, more structure. It doesn't make you rigid, it frees your mind to care about what matters. And now, with your decision clutter beginning to thin, we move into something your brain loves to keep alive: open loops. Unfinished business. That nagging feeling that something is left undone. And oddly enough, it might be the secret to staying engaged longer than you ever expected. You know that feeling when you lie down, finally ready for sleep, and your brain suddenly plays a highlight reel of every single thing you forgot to do today? That email you didn't send, the laundry still waiting, the 3-minute task you've delayed for a week? That's the Zeigarnik effect at work, your brain's stubborn refusal to let go of unfinished business. It's not trying to be cruel. It's trying to be helpful. The Zeigarnik effect, named after Russian psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik, is your mind's way of keeping tabs on incomplete tasks. Zeigarnik discovered this quirk while watching waiters in a cafe. They remembered unpaid orders with stunning accuracy, until the check was settled. After that, total memory wipe. Here's the science twist: your brain tags unfinished tasks as important and keeps resurfacing them, hoping you'll complete the loop. That little mental itch? It's your brain whispering, "We're not done yet." And as annoying as it can be, you can actually harness this to boost your focus. Here's something interesting: when students were interrupted mid-task, they were significantly more likely to remember the material later than those who completed it in one sitting. Your brain prioritizes the undone. It wants resolution. Closure. It doesn't like leaving loops open. So, instead of resisting that mental noise, use it. Start something, then intentionally pause. Not out of distraction, but design. If you're working on a creative project, stop mid-sentence, mid-idea, mid-energy. That little cliffhanger sticks in your brain. When you return, your motivation reboots faster, because the loop is still active. Hemingway did this, by the way. He'd stop writing when things were going well, so he could pick up right where the momentum left off. Here's a fun little twist: mystery novels and serialized TV shows are basically commercialized Zeigarnik effects. They dangle an open loop. Will they survive? Who's behind the door? And keep your brain hooked until resolution. It's marketing psychology, sure, but it's also neurological glue. The issue has sparked significant intellectual debate. Some scholars argue that constantly carrying mental, open tabs increases anxiety and impairs sleep. Others believe that open loops keep us mentally agile and task-oriented. The key? Learning to balance which loops stay open, and how we manage them. Something unexpected you'll want to know: simply writing down your unfinished tasks can reduce the brain's need to obsess over them. Your brain treats the act of documenting as partial closure. That's why even a scrappy to-do list can feel calming. It's like giving your brain permission to stop spinning. But it goes deeper. Keeping a list of ongoing tasks isn't just for peace of mind, it actually boosts focus. Each time you review that list, your mind reactivates the loop and starts preparing to finish it. This gentle pressure can increase follow-through, especially if the tasks are bite-sized and visible. That's the trick: break goals into steps that look finishable. Big, vague tasks like work on novel or start business don't trigger urgency. But write 200 words or design logo draft feel tangible. Your brain knows how to close that loop, and once it does, it'll beg for another. You can even build a rhythm around this. Start a project, intentionally pause at a midpoint, and leave yourself a clear re-entry point. A note. A folder. A sentence to finish. This primes your next work session with readiness, not hesitation. And if you've ever noticed that you remember tasks better when you can't act on them, like thinking of an errand right after the stores close, it's because your brain tags unclosable loops with higher urgency. You literally can't stop thinking about it. So use that. Tease your brain with incompleteness. Then finish it deliberately when you're back in the zone. Here's a practical move. Create a parking lot list, a document for half-formed ideas and tasks you're not tackling today, but don't want to forget. It relieves the pressure without deleting the loop entirely. You'll know it's there, waiting. Your brain can let go, for now. And let's talk briefly about ritual closures, micro-practices that give your brain a signal that the loop is finished. Shutting down your laptop with a few deep breaths. Saying out loud, "That's enough for today." Even tidying your workspace. These signals matter more than you think. They're your brain's version of tucking something in for the night. Because otherwise, you drag mental clutter into the next task, the next hour, even your sleep. And that fog kills motivation. You need clear boundaries to create clean focus. Just a quirky example, in Japanese culture, the act of bowing after a meeting or task marks closure and respect. Not just socially, but mentally. A respectful, "We're done." You can build your own version, close a journal, tap a tabletop, light a candle, whatever signals, this loop is closed. But some loops should stay open, just long enough to keep you curious. Use them strategically. A creative spark you want to pick up tomorrow. A workout plan you want to finish next week. Don't fear the cliffhanger. Let it draw you forward. So, as you relax deeper and begin noticing which loops in your mind are open, ask yourself, which ones are draining me, and which ones are pulling me forward? That distinction can change everything. And now, let's follow that energy shift into something softer and deeper. Your motivation doesn't just rise and fall randomly. It follows a natural rhythm, a daily current that flows through your body and brain. If you learn to work with it, instead of against it, everything gets easier. Let's drift gently into the science of cycles, and how honoring your daily rhythm might be the missing piece. There's a moment in every day, often fleeting, when everything just clicks. Your thoughts feel sharp, your energy hums just right, and motivation doesn't need to be coaxed out of hiding. It's just there. That's not luck. That's rhythm. And your brain lives by it. We're not talking metaphors. Your energy, focus, and drive actually move in biological waves. There's a name for this, circadian rhythm, and it's as old as life itself. Literally. Even jellyfish without brains still follow one. You probably associate circadian rhythms with sleep, and yes, they rule your sleep-wake cycle. But these rhythms also control your hormone levels, body temperature, mental clarity, and, you guessed it, motivation. You have a focus window, whether you know it or not. And forcing yourself to be productive outside that window? It's like trying to surf on dry pavement. Here's a fun fact: your body's core temperature rises during the day and dips at night. That rise is tied to increased alertness and better motor control. In other words, when your body's warmest, your brain is also primed. For most people, this peak focus time lands between 9 a.m. and noon. But there's variation. Here's something that might surprise you. Some people are natural larks, morning focused, while others are owls, night focused. Your chronotype, the fancy term for your biological time preference, can explain why 6 a.m. workouts energize your neighbor but make you feel like you're auditioning for a zombie movie. Philosophers have long debated the extent to which humans can, or should, override their natural rhythms. Can discipline rewire your internal clock? Or should you build a life around it? The science leans toward respect. While habits can stretch your timing, fighting your rhythm endlessly leads to burnout. The body remembers. So how do you work with your rhythm? Start by paying attention. When do you feel most focused? When does your energy crash? Track this for a few days. You'll notice a pattern. Maybe your mind's sharp mid-morning but melts after lunch. Maybe you get a second wind at 9:30 p.m. That's your rhythm speaking. Don't argue, listen. A weird little bonus: NASA designs astronaut schedules down to the minute based on circadian science. Light exposure, tasks, meals, all synchronized to protect mental health and motivation in space, where Earth's natural cues are gone. If it matters that much off the planet, it probably matters for your Tuesday afternoon. Once you find your peaks, protect them. Guard them like treasure. Don't waste your high-energy window checking emails or folding socks. That's prime time for your deep, meaningful work, the kind that takes real focus and internal drive. The kind that moves your goals forward. And during your slumps? That's the time for admin tasks, gentle routines, or even rest. Yes, rest. Motivation isn't supposed to run 24/7. Your body literally can't do that. In fact, ultradian rhythms, shorter cycles nested within your circadian rhythm, suggest that your brain naturally pulses through 90-minute work and recovery intervals. After about 90 minutes of focused work, your cognitive performance dips. Pushing through it is like hitting the gas with no fuel. Here's something practical. Set a timer for 90 minutes. Work deeply. Then stop. Step outside. Stretch. Sip something. Breathe. Let your nervous system downshift. Then, and only then, start another sprint. It feels less productive at first. But you'll get more done because you're honoring the wave, not bulldozing through it. Another tip? Manipulate light. Your circadian rhythm is heavily influenced by light exposure. Morning sunlight helps anchor your rhythm. Think of it as a natural start button for your brain. So, if you want to feel more motivated earlier, step outside or sit by a window for 10 minutes after waking up. It's not spiritual. It's photoreceptors doing their job. But if you stare at screens until midnight? Congratulations, you just told your brain it's still daytime. And you wonder why focus feels foggy the next morning. So yes, circadian rhythm matters. But so does rhythm in your work. Creative work has a rhythm. Physical effort has one. Even conversations and relationships move to a certain beat. Tune in, and motivation often shows up. Tune out, and everything starts to feel like static. And if you're thinking, well, I've got kids, a job, and a dog that eats slippers at 6 a.m., I can't follow my rhythm, that's valid. Life isn't a lab. But you don't need to follow it perfectly. You just need to acknowledge it. Even small shifts, like doing your hardest task in your strongest hour, can change the day's trajectory. It's about working with yourself, not against yourself. Just a quirky note, some schools in Scandinavia now stagger learning hours based on student chronotypes. Night owl teens do better with later start times. Who knew biology could beat alarm clocks? So don't just ask yourself, what do I want to get done today? Ask, when is the best window to do it? Time isn't just about schedules. It's about alignment. And when your goals and your biology line up, that's when motivation feels natural, not forced. Now, with your rhythm whispering in the background and your energy starting to flow with the day, not against it, it's time to look around. Not inside, but outside. Because while internal drive matters, your environment is always influencing you in quiet, sneaky ways. Let's explore how your surroundings shape your motivation, and how a few tweaks could unlock focus you didn't know you had. Imagine walking into a room that smells like fresh coffee, sunlight streaming in, a tidy workspace waiting, everything exactly where it should be. Notice how your brain relaxes? Maybe even perks up a bit? That's not coincidence. That's your environment sending motivational signals through your nervous system. Your space speaks, quietly, constantly, and what it says shapes how focused and driven you feel. The truth is, motivation isn't just something that lives inside your brain. It's also around you, on your desk, in your lighting, your furniture, your tabs, your clutter. Your environment acts like a behavioral script, nudging you gently toward, or away from, your goals. This idea isn't just fluffy feng shui talk. In psychology, it's called cue-based behavior. Your brain is always scanning for context clues. Put running shoes by the door, and you're more likely to run. Keep cookies on the counter, and you'll grab one before you even think. Your environment creates habits without asking for permission. Let me share a neat bit with you. Researchers found that people who left fruit in plain sight on their kitchen counter ate healthier than those who kept it hidden. Visibility changes behavior. Not willpower. Not goals. Just where the apple is. There is ongoing debate about how much control we actually have over environmental triggers. Some behavioral scientists believe we can design our surroundings to override even deeply ingrained habits. Others argue that environments are just one part of a much messier picture, including trauma, emotion, and subconscious belief. But what's undeniable is this: your space matters more than you probably think. A small, quirky twist: in one study, people were significantly more likely to remember to take their medication if they placed the pill bottle next to their toothbrush. The cue didn't need to shout. It just had to exist in the right spot, quietly waiting for the moment when behavior happens on autopilot. So, how do you use this? First, look around. What does your environment suggest you do? If your desk is buried under bills, laundry, and sticky notes from last year, it's not screaming, "Focus." It's whispering, "Run away." Clear it. Not into the abyss, but intentionally. Create a space where the desired action feels easy. Accessible. Ready. You don't need minimalist perfection. You just need intentional friction. Make good habits easier to start, and bad habits harder to continue. Want to scroll less? Keep your phone in another room. Want to journal more? Leave the notebook open on your pillow. These micro adjustments are silent allies. And your digital space? Oh, it's influencing you too. 10 open tabs. Constant notifications? That's motivational noise. Each ping splits your attention, each visual reminder of another task quietly tells your brain, you're behind. Try closing and use tabs, turning off notifications, and using full screen mode for deep work. You're not antisocial. You're just pro-focus. And lighting, yes, lighting matters. Natural light improves alertness and mood. Blue-tinted light in the morning can boost cognitive performance. Warm lighting in the evening helps signal wind down. There's a reason cozy cafes and co-working spaces use lighting like an art form. Because it is. You might find this surprising: people are more honest in rooms with mirrors. Not because of vanity, but because seeing themselves triggers a self-awareness cue. This little phenomenon has been used in stores to reduce shoplifting and in schools to discourage cheating. Imagine what it could do for your habits. And don't forget sound. Background noise, music, silence, it all sends signals. Some people thrive with ambient cafe noise, there are even playlists for that, while others need silence. The key is testing. Notice what sounds make your brain lean in, and what makes it shut down. Even smell plays a role. Just a quirky example: the scent of peppermint has been shown to boost alertness and reduce fatigue in some lab studies. That's right, peppermint oil might beat your second cup of coffee. Give your brain a little sensory boost, and it might just thank you with a longer focus span. But beyond sensory tweaks, your environment also holds meaning. Sentimental clutter, visual chaos, reminders of past failures, all of these influence how motivated you feel. They send emotional cues. Sometimes, the best way to reignite your focus is to remove the object that silently says, "Remember when you quit?" And on the flip side, surround yourself with small symbols of progress. A quote that makes you smile. A photo of a trip you worked hard to afford. A sticky note that reads, "Keep going." These aren't cheesy, they're anchors. You don't need to burn sage and rearrange furniture every week. But do audit your space now and then. Ask, is this environment helping or hurting the person I want to be? Because here's the quiet truth: motivation doesn't always need to come from inside. Sometimes, it just needs to be cued by a world that's been set up to support you, not distract you. Your space can become a silent partner. A nudge. A whisper that says, "You've got this." And once you start listening to that whisper, your external world and internal world sync up. You're no longer fighting your surroundings, you're flowing with them. Now, as you settle into this awareness of your space and how it speaks, let's drift inward again. Sometimes, despite every good cue, your focus still falters. Your drive dissolves into fog. That's not failure, it's stress. And the way your brain responds to pressure can either shut motivation down or gently rekindle it. Let's ease into the next layer and explore how stress hijacks your drive, and how you can calm it before it crashes your goals. Stress doesn't always come barging in like a thunderstorm. Sometimes, it shows up as a quiet hum under your skin, a restless feeling in your legs, a clenched jaw you didn't realize was clenched. You sit down to work, but your brain's stuck in buffering mode. You can't focus. You scroll. You snack. You do literally anything except the thing you meant to do. That's not procrastination, it's self-protection. Because stress doesn't just make you feel bad. It shuts down your motivation. Let's start with the basics. When you're under pressure, your body activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Yep, the HPA axis. This launches a chemical cascade that floods your system with cortisol, your stress hormone. Cortisol is helpful in emergencies. It sharpens focus, raises blood sugar, preps you for action. But chronic cortisol? That's another story. It numbs your reward system. It makes everything feel pointless, even things you used to love. Something you'll want to know: studies show that long-term stress can shrink the hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for memory and learning. It also messes with the prefrontal cortex, the home of planning, reasoning, and, yep, motivation. Basically, stress rewires your brain to prioritize survival over creativity. You don't care about your goals when your brain thinks you're being chased by metaphorical lions. A random tidbit for you: zebras experience intense stress when chased by predators, but the moment the chase ends, they go back to grazing like nothing happened. Humans? We ruminate. Replay. Forecast. Worry in loops. Your brain can't tell the difference between a deadline and a danger zone, so it keeps sounding the alarm long after the lion has left. There remains considerable disagreement about the relationship between stress and performance. Some researchers argue that moderate stress can enhance focus, what's known as the Yerkes-Dodson law. A little pressure sharpens us. But once you cross the threshold, everything crashes. You freeze. You retreat. Your to-do list becomes a wall instead of a map. And that's where stress hijacks your drive. You stop being motivated because you're overwhelmed. You can't start, not because you don't care, but because your system is maxed out. So what's the fix? It's not hustle, it's regulation. You need to bring your nervous system down first. Otherwise, nothing else works. Your motivation is like a car, but if the engine's flooded, it's not going anywhere. Start small. Breathe. Not metaphorically, actually. A simple exhale-focused breath can calm the vagus nerve and signal safety to your brain. Try a 4 to 6 breathing pattern. Inhale for 4 seconds, exhale for 6. Do that a few times, slowly. It sounds too simple to matter, but your nervous system responds in seconds. And once it calms down, your motivation begins to stir again. A little surprise for you: Navy SEALs use controlled breathing to stay calm in combat. If it works under life or death pressure, it can probably help you face your inbox. Next, check your body. Stress often pools there. Tight shoulders. Shallow breathing. Tension in the jaw. Stretch. Move. Shake it off, literally. Your body stores stress like a zip file, and physical movement unpacks it. And if you're sitting in clutter? Tidy something. A single drawer. A 5-minute surface reset. Not for perfection, but to create a sense of agency. Stress makes you feel powerless. Action, even tiny action, reminds you that you're still steering the ship. Another trick: lower the stakes. Stress often spikes because you've made the task too loaded. Instead of, "I must write something amazing," shift to, "I'll write for 10 minutes. Give yourself a foothold. Shrink the mountain. Remind your brain, this isn't life or death, it's just a paragraph. Just a quirky example: writer Neil Gaiman once said that when he's blocked, he lets himself sit at the desk and do nothing, but he's not allowed to leave. No email. No snack. Just writing or sitting. Eventually, the boredom makes writing seem like the more interesting option. He lowers the emotional pressure and lets motivation sneak back in. And don't underestimate recovery. Sleep, hydration, nutrition, these aren't luxuries. They're biological repair systems. Cortisol doesn't leave your body just because you will it to. You have to rest it out. And not with doom scrolling. With actual rest. Walks. Music. Stillness. Laughter. You don't hustle your way out of burnout. You restore your way out. Philosophers have long debated the value of rest. Is it wasted time? Or sacred? In hustle culture, rest is often treated as a reward. But in many spiritual and ancient traditions, rest is part of the cycle. A necessity. A source of renewal. The truth might live somewhere in between, rest as a rhythm, not an indulgence. And sometimes, what helps most is talking. Stress shrinks in shared spaces. Say it out loud to someone. Journal it. Text a friend. Verbalizing stress often helps the prefrontal cortex re-engage. You remember you're not alone. Your brain stops bracing for impact. So when your motivation vanishes and stress fogs your mind, try this path: regulate, reset, and then re-enter your work slowly. Like slipping into a warm pool. Let yourself find your way back, not with force, but with patience. Now, once your nervous system is grounded and your brain begins to clear, something remarkable happens. You're not just pulling from within anymore. You begin to draw strength from outside, from others. Because motivation doesn't live in isolation. It's contagious. Let's explore how social connections, subtle mirroring, and accountability loops can reignite your fire when nothing else does. You ever notice how being around someone focused makes you suddenly want to sit up straighter and get your life together? Or how just telling someone you're working on a goal makes you stick with it longer, even if they never mention it again? That's not a coincidence. That's social motivation doing its thing. And it's sneakier and stronger than you might expect. Humans are wired to adapt to each other. You're not just an independent mind floating around, you're a social creature, constantly responding to other people's energy, pace, and expectations. And when it comes to staying focused, that social wiring might just be one of your biggest hidden tools. In neuroscience, mirror neurons are the brain cells that fire not only when you perform an action, but when you watch someone else perform it. That's why you cringe when someone stubs their toe, or why you feel emotionally lifted when you see someone being productive. Your brain is practicing what it sees, even if you're just sitting there. This is why co-working spaces, study with me videos, and quiet cafes can be surprisingly energizing. Even when no one's talking. The presence of other focused people helps cue your own focus. You feel observed, lightly, not intrusively, and that awareness nudges you into your best behavior. Here's another weird but true finding. Some people live stream themselves working for hours, saying nothing, just sitting and typing. These body double streams have gained millions of views. Why? Because watching someone work helps you work. Motivation, it turns out, is socially contagious, even in silence. Now, let's talk accountability. Telling someone your goal creates mild pressure to follow through. Not the terrifying, public declaration kind, just a simple shared reality. I'm working on this, you say. And now part of you wants to deliver. Not to impress. Just to stay in integrity. Studies show that people who report progress to someone regularly, like a friend, coach, or even a group chat, are far more likely to hit their goals than those who keep it all in their head. It's not about being watched. It's about being witnessed. The issue has sparked significant intellectual debate. Does external accountability compromise intrinsic motivation? Some argue it creates dependence. You need someone else to keep you going. Others say it strengthens resolve by adding emotional structure. Like scaffolding. Not a crutch, but a frame that helps you build something taller. Here's something unexpectedly useful. even imagined accountability works. Just picturing how someone you respect might react to your progress can boost your motivation. Your brain is like, we're being evaluated, even if it's completely fictional. Hello, imaginary TED Talk audience. And if you've ever been part of a fitness challenge, a writing group, or a friend pact to drink more water, you know the power of being in it with others. It's not even about perfection. Just showing up, knowing someone else is too, creates momentum. So how do you use this? Start with small circles. Tell one person what you're working on. Pick someone kind, not critical. Share your goal casually. Not a speech, just a, hey, I'm trying this. You've opened a loop now, remember section 6, and your brain wants to close it. Or try passive accountability. Post daily progress to a private channel. Use an app like Beeminder that tracks goals and, gently, finds you if you drop off. Join an online group where people check in with tiny wins. The trick isn't pressure, it's presence. Even better? Link your goal to someone else's success. If your work benefits a team, a friend, a client, a cause, your motivation deepens. You're not just working for you anymore. You're part of something. That emotional weight can pull you through slumps. In one study, radiologists became significantly more accurate when shown a photo of the patient whose scan they were analyzing. That tiny reminder of human connection changed how focused and invested they were. When work feels personal, it becomes meaningful. And meaning drives motivation like nothing else. So yes, your motivation is personal. But it's also relational. You're influenced by energy, empathy, and expectation. The trick is choosing the right kind of social loop. Protect yourself from comparison traps. Not all social motivation is positive. Scrolling through highlight reels on social media can demotivate you, making your own pace feel slow or pointless. That's not accountability. That's ego hijacking. Instead, curate your influence. Follow people whose progress inspires, not intimidates. Connect with others on the same journey. Make space for honesty. I didn't do much today, but I showed up. Those small shares matter more than perfect streaks. And remember this, no one has to be perfect to keep you going. They just have to be present. Even digitally. Even quietly. Now, with the warmth of human connection lighting a small flame inside you, let's turn our gaze inward again. Not toward pressure, but toward pleasure. Because the deepest, most sustainable motivation doesn't come from deadlines or dopamine spikes. It comes from meaning. From doing something that feels good to do, not just good to complete. Let's explore intrinsic rewards, the quiet joy that keeps you coming back when applause fades and no one's watching. There's a kind of motivation that doesn't shout. It doesn't sprint or demand attention. It hums. It pulls. It makes you want to come back not because you have to, but because something about the work feels right. Fulfilling. Like drinking cold water when you didn't even realize you were thirsty. That's intrinsic motivation, and it's the most powerful kind there is. Unlike extrinsic motivation, which relies on rewards, gold stars, praise, paychecks, or fear of failure, intrinsic motivation is about doing something because it matters to you. Because it aligns with your values, your curiosity, or your sense of self. The reward is baked into the action itself. Here's something interesting. In a classic study by psychologist Edward Deci, participants who were paid to solve puzzles lost interest in doing them once the money stopped. But those who weren't paid in the first place? They kept puzzling. Why? Because they were never in it for the prize. They were in it for the process. Believe it or not, the moment you turn a hobby into a hustle, when you tie money or performance metrics to something you once did for fun, your intrinsic motivation often dips. This is known as the overjustification effect. Your brain thinks, if I'm being rewarded, this must be work, not joy. And suddenly, it's harder to care the way you used to. This doesn't mean you can't enjoy getting paid for what you love. But it does mean you have to protect the part of it that still feels internally satisfying. Keep a corner of your creativity that's just for you, where no one's watching, measuring, or clapping. Philosophers have long debated the nature of happiness. Is it found in pleasure? In purpose? In freedom? Many now argue that it's found in flow, a mental state where you're so absorbed in an activity that time blurs. You're challenged, but not overwhelmed. Engaged, but not stressed. Motivation flows like water because you're doing the thing for its own sake. Flow is often described as the holy grail of productivity and passion. But here's the catch: you can't force it. You can only create the conditions for it to emerge. Just a quirky detail: Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the psychologist who coined the term flow, found that people often experienced it during surprisingly mundane tasks, like rock climbing, playing chess, or even assembling machinery. The common thread? Clear goals, immediate feedback, and total immersion. So how do you design your life for intrinsic motivation? Start by asking better questions. Not, what should I be doing, but, what makes me lose track of time? Not, what's productive, but, what feels meaningful, even in small moments? Then, notice where your curiosity naturally goes. What articles do you read even when you're tired? What kind of conversations energize you? What kinds of problems do you want to solve, even when no one's asking? This isn't just about work. It's about weaving joy into effort. Intrinsic motivation doesn't mean everything is easy. It means even the hard parts feel worthwhile. A writer may struggle with editing, but they still return to the page. A dancer may ache, but they still move. It's the difference between exertion and resentment. And sometimes, the joy isn't immediate, but it grows. You can cultivate intrinsic motivation by finding purpose in small things. The satisfaction of organizing something messy. The pride in making something better. The quiet thrill of keeping a promise to yourself. These are real rewards, even if they don't come with applause. Here's a practical tip: use a joy journal. Once a day, jot down one thing you did that felt intrinsically rewarding. Not, I checked off 5 tasks, but I felt good while solving that tricky code bug, or, I liked how I phrased that email. You're training your brain to notice and seek out that kind of fulfillment. Also, protect your creative autonomy. Intrinsic motivation thrives on choice. When you feel like you have to do something, your motivation drops. When you feel like you get to, it rises. Even if the task is required, you can tweak your approach to feel more autonomous. Change your timing, your method, your angle of attack. Google once had a 20% time rule. Employees could spend 20% of their time on any project they wanted, even if it wasn't part of their job description. Many of Google's biggest innovations, like Gmail and AdSense, came from this freedom. Because when people care, they create. The issue has sparked significant debate among workplace psychologists. Can intrinsic motivation survive in corporate structures? Some say yes, with the right culture. Others argue that performance reviews and profit pressures always end up squeezing it out. What's clear is that when intrinsic motivation is nurtured, it leads to higher engagement, better problem solving, and longer-lasting commitment. And even in your personal life, this matters. Think of the difference between exercising because you hate your body versus moving because you enjoy how strong you're becoming. One approach drains you. The other fills you. So ask yourself often, not what you should do, but what you value. What kind of effort feels aligned with who you are, or who you want to be? That's the root of sustainable drive. When effort becomes expression, motivation becomes natural. Now, with your joy flickering gently in the background and your effort beginning to feel like its own reward, we ease into a strategy so small, it almost feels silly. But don't underestimate it. Because when done right, it rewires everything. Let's drift into the science of microhabits, and how tiny wins, repeated consistently, can carry you all the way to your biggest goals. Big goals get all the glory. You dream of writing the novel, launching the business, transforming your life in a single swoop. But motivation isn't built in leaps. It's built in steps, tiny, often invisible ones. That's the science of microhabits. And if motivation has a secret weapon, this is it. Microhabits are small, repeatable behaviors that seem almost laughably easy. Like doing one push-up, writing one sentence, drinking one sip of water. But here's the trick, they're not about results at first. They're about building identity and momentum, two things motivation thrives on. You might like this one. Research from B.J. Fogg at Stanford shows that habits stick best when they're anchored to existing routines and scaled down to minimum resistance. Not floss all your teeth, but floss one tooth. Not go to the gym, but put on your gym shoes. The smaller the ask, the easier the win. And once you win, even a little, your brain starts craving more. Why? Because success releases dopamine. And dopamine isn't just a reward chemical. It's a reinforcement loop. The more you experience small wins, the more your brain builds associations like, hey, we like this. Let's do it again. You might find this surprising. Tiny wins actually change your brain. Repeating a microhabit strengthens neural pathways associated with that behavior. Over time, what was once effortful becomes automatic. It's called long-term potentiation, and it's why you don't need to psych yourself up to brush your teeth, you just do it. An odd but true fact, Japanese Kaizen philosophy, which emphasizes continuous improvement through tiny changes, helped rebuild entire industries after World War II. Entire nations improved by focusing on micromastery. So yes, writing one sentence a day really can matter. There remains considerable disagreement about how small is too small. Some behavioral psychologists argue that overly micro goals feel trivial and can be dismissed. Others believe they're the only reliable entry point when motivation is low or burnout is near. In practice, most people discover this: when you're overwhelmed, smaller always wins. The trick is consistency. A microhabit practice daily builds psychological traction. It's not glamorous, but it's dependable. And that dependability breeds trust in yourself. And when you trust yourself, you want to show up. That's the real engine of motivation, not hype, not fear, but belief. Start with what feels laughably easy. Want to meditate? Sit quietly for 30 seconds. Want to read more? Open the book and read one paragraph. That's it. If you do more, great. But the goal is always the minimum, not the maximum. That's how you bypass resistance. Here's something else: stack your microhabits. Pair them with existing routines. After you pour your coffee, journal one line. After you brush your teeth, take one deep breath. Your brain starts linking the actions, and the cue becomes automatic. These are called habit stacks, and they're one of the fastest ways to build sustainable routines. And it's okay if it feels silly. In fact, that's kind of the point. When something feels too small to fail, your brain stops resisting. There's no pressure. No fear of not doing enough. Just motion. Just progress. Did you know this? Comedian Jerry Seinfeld famously used a "don't break the chain" method to keep writing jokes. He'd write daily, no matter what, and mark an X on a calendar. The growing chain became the motivation. Not the joke. Not the performance. Just the streak. Your brain likes visual proof of progress. Use it. Apps like Habitica, Streaks, and TickTick tap into this. They gamify microhabits and celebrate streaks. Some even let you earn little digital pets for staying consistent. Yes, your brain will work for imaginary unicorns. Don't judge it, just harness it. And when you miss a day, shrug. Don't turn it into a moral failure. One miss is neutral. 2 in a row is a pattern. The real skill isn't never falling off, it's getting back on fast. That's resilience. That's motivation's backup generator. And here's the lovely part: once a microhabit is in place, it often grows organically. One push-up becomes 3. One sentence becomes a paragraph. But even if it doesn't, you're still showing up. And showing up, day after day, builds the muscle that matters most: self-trust. Philosophers have long debated whether character is revealed in great acts or small, repeated choices. Microhabits quietly cast their vote. Greatness is built daily. Invisibly. Not in the spotlight, but in the shadows of routine. And if you've ever tried to make a huge change overnight and burned out by day 3, you know this truth already. Ambition is thrilling, but gentle persistence actually works. So if you feel stuck, start smaller. Then go even smaller than that. Until the action is too easy to resist. That's where motivation lives, not in the mountaintop, but in the foothold. And now, as you begin to see that the tiniest actions can lead to lasting change, we'll ease into something that often interrupts that progress: failure. Not the catastrophic kind, but the quiet stumbles that make you doubt yourself. Let's gently explore how reframing failure, and learning to build grit, can turn your setbacks into stepping stones. Failure has a way of making itself loud, doesn't it? You could have 10 small wins in a row, but one mistake, one missed day, one wrong turn, and suddenly your brain goes full drama. Well, that's it. Might as well delete the whole spreadsheet, eat an entire loaf of bread, and start a new life under a fake name. But here's the thing, failure isn't the opposite of motivation. It's part of the ecosystem. And if you learn how to reframe it, failure becomes something surprising: fuel. Let's start here. Failure hurts not because it proves you're incapable, but because it threatens your identity. Remember that? From section 4? When you mess up, your mind tries to make sense of it. Maybe I'm not the kind of person who can stick with things. That quiet identity shift is what really drains motivation, not the stumble, but the story. This one's pretty cool. Research by Carol Dweck introduced the concept of mindset, and it's now everywhere for a reason. People with a fixed mindset believe abilities are static. You're either talented or you're not. People with a growth mindset believe abilities can be developed with effort. The result? Those with a growth mindset don't fear failure. They see it as information. But there's more. Grit researcher Angela Duckworth found that perseverance, not talent, is a better predictor of long-term success. Grit is what keeps you going when motivation runs out and the excitement fades. It's a blend of passion and resilience. And it's not something you either have or don't. It's something you practice. Researchers remain split on whether grit can truly be taught. Some critics argue it's too individualistic, ignoring systemic barriers. Others say resilience training can be powerful, but only if combined with support, rest, and emotional safety. One thing's for sure, trying again after failure is a skill. And skills can grow. A random gem from history: Thomas Edison famously said he didn't fail 1,000 times while inventing the light bulb. He discovered 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb. A cliché? Maybe. But it's also neurochemically smart. Framing failure as discovery keeps your brain engaged. It tells your motivation system, there's still something here worth doing. So how do you start reframing your own missteps? First, normalize them. Everyone falls off. Everyone misses days. Even Olympic athletes, best-selling authors, and monks with really good posture. They all screw up. The only difference is, they don't let that become the final sentence. They just turn the page. Try saying this instead: I failed at the behavior, not at being the kind of person who tries. That tiny shift keeps your identity intact while allowing for mess. Next, get curious. Instead of spiraling into shame, ask, what actually went wrong? Did I overcommit? Did I try to make a big leap instead of a small step? Was I tired? Stressed? Bored? Find the friction point. Not to blame yourself, but to tweak the system. Every failure is a design insight in disguise. Here's something delightful: high performers often review their failures with the same analytical tone they use to review successes. They don't collapse. They debrief. This didn't work. Why? Becomes a tool, not a verdict. And here's something very human: when you talk to someone else about your failure, especially someone kind, it shrinks. You stop feeling like a lone disaster and remember that stumbles are universal. That conversation can bring you back from the motivational edge faster than any self-help quote ever could. The band OK Go, known for their intricate music videos, often embraces errors in the final product. A mistimed bounce, an unexpected drop, if it adds life, it stays. Their entire creative process is built on making space for surprises. That's not sloppiness, it's grit with a sense of humor. And when you do bounce back, celebrate it. Not with fireworks. Just with a quiet, honest nod, look at me, still trying. That's where long-term motivation lives, not in never failing, but in returning again and again. Here's a tip: keep a resilience record. It's not for wins, it's for comebacks. A little note: skip journaling for 3 days. Start it again anyway. Or, bombed that presentation, but followed up the next morning. You're training your mind to remember, you're not the kind of person who never falls, you're the kind who gets up. Philosophers have long debated the nature of virtue. Is it found in intention or in action? The Stoics believed virtue lies in perseverance, showing up for what matters, even when it's hard, even when you don't win. Especially then. And remember this: most lasting change looks unimpressive day to day. It's not linear. It loops. You'll have surges, stalls, setbacks, and breakthroughs. But if you learn to ride the dips, not fight them, you stay in motion. And in motion is where motivation lives. So, if you're tired of stopping at every wrong turn, make a new promise: keep turning back. That's the grit move. That's what builds strength. Not perfection, but return. Now, as you begin to see your failures not as signs to stop but as signals to adapt, we arrive at the final stretch. It's not about chasing motivation anymore, it's about sustaining it, long term. Let's close this loop and explore what it really means to stay motivated for life, not with force, but with a quiet, steady flame. You've walked through sparks and slumps. You felt motivation swell like a wave, then vanish without warning. You've tried the systems, the psychology, the rituals. And now, you're probably wondering, how do I make this last? Because the truth is, short-term motivation is easy. Anyone can sprint for a day or two, ride the dopamine wave, post a new goal online, and go full tilt until they burn out by Wednesday. But long-term motivation? The kind that carries you through months, years, even decades? That requires something softer. Something steadier. Something real. It's not about intensity. It's about sustainability. Here's something interesting: in long-distance races, elite athletes don't run as hard as they can every mile. They pace. They stay just under their physical limit so they can maintain it. That's not laziness. That's strategy. And it applies to your life just as much as it applies to marathons. This might flip your expectations. Motivation doesn't need to feel huge to be effective. It doesn't have to look like fiery speeches or dramatic to-do lists. Often, it's quiet. Subtle. Like brushing your teeth, returning to the keyboard, choosing the water instead of the soda. Little acts that look boring, until you see how they build your future. Experts are divided on what fuels lifelong motivation. Some say it's purpose. Others say it's habit. Others still believe it's love, loving what you do, or who you do it for. But what nearly everyone agrees on is this: motivation that lasts must be resilient. It must survive boredom, delay, disappointment, real life. So how do you nurture motivation that can go the distance? First, shift your metric. Instead of asking, "Am I excited to do this?" try, "Am I willing to stay with this, even when I'm not?" That's a deeper kind of commitment. One rooted not in mood, but in meaning. Because the truth is, you won't always feel like showing up. And that's okay. You shouldn't feel motivated every day. That's not failure. That's biology. What matters more is whether you've created a life that gently pulls you back even when the spark is dim. That's where rituals come in. Rituals are your motivational safety net. They don't rely on hype. They don't ask how you feel. They just say, this is what we do next. Just a quirky detail. Novelist Haruki Murakami follows the same schedule every day while writing a book. Wake at 4 a.m., write for 5 hours, run or swim, eat, sleep by 9 p.m. He treats writing not like inspiration, but like oxygen. Routine creates rhythm. Rhythm creates endurance. And don't underestimate the power of refresh. Long-term motivation isn't just repetition, it's gentle renewal. Let your routines evolve. Shift your environment. Try new formats. A journal becomes a voice memo. A workout becomes a hike. Keep the soul of the habit, but let the shape shift. That's how you stay curious. Another secret? Integration. Motivation survives longer when it isn't separated from the rest of your life. Don't treat goals as something you do after everything else. Weave them in. Let your values show up at breakfast, in emails, in conversations. The more your goal becomes part of who you are, the less it feels like effort. And here's the last quiet truth: aging changes your motivation. When you're young, it's often about potential, what you could do, become, achieve. Later, it shifts. It becomes about consistency, about legacy, about depth. You begin to value peace over proof. Focus becomes less about chasing and more about choosing. Philosophers have long debated the good life. Is it achievement? Is it balance? Maybe it's neither. Maybe it's something like this: waking up each day and knowing what matters to you, then giving a little bit of yourself to that. Over and over. Gently. Without needing to be perfect. And when you fall off, return softly. Motivation that lasts isn't fierce. It's forgiving. So, how do you stay motivated for life? You honor your rhythm. You shrink the steps. You forgive the gaps. You let identity grow slowly around your habits like ivy on a wall. And you keep walking, not because you're on fire every day, but because the path matters. You matter. Your effort matters. Let's start to slow down now. Let your breath settle. Not every insight tonight was meant to push you. Some were simply here to soothe. To remind you that motivation isn't magic, it's a process. A quiet, sometimes clumsy, always human process. Maybe you're not where you thought you'd be by now. Maybe the goals you set feel too far, too fuzzy, or too heavy. That's okay. You haven't failed. You're still moving. Still learning how your own mind works. That, in itself, is progress. Close your eyes now, if they're not already closed. Let your jaw unclench. Soften your forehead. Loosen your grip on whatever weight you've been holding in your mind. You've made it through the depths of motivation science, not with hype, but with gentleness. You understand now that there are rhythms to respect, spaces to reset, and small steps that count more than we ever realized. Your path forward doesn't need to be mapped. It just needs to feel real. And kind. And yours. So, take that first micro step tomorrow. Or the next day. No pressure. No guilt. Let motivation flow in when it wants to, and lean on structure when it doesn't. You're not behind. You're just in motion. Before you drift off, remember. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to keep returning. Gently. Patiently. On your terms. Let your goals rest beside you now, like gentle companions, quiet, loyal, and waiting. Everything else can wait until morning. Let sleep carry you forward. You've done enough for today.